The stellar Waypoint station hung like a glittering jewel against the backdrop of deep space, its rotating rings catching starlight in hypnotic patterns. In the station's mid-levels, tucked between hydroponics gardens and engineering access corridors, sat Murphy's all-night diner, one of the few establishments that served both human comfort food and carefully synthesized alien cuisine around the clock. Sarah Chen wiped down the counter for the 100th time that shift, her movements automatic after 3 years of working the graveyard rotation. The diner's worn chrome surfaces and soft blue lighting gave it an almost ethereal quality during the station's artificial night cycle. Most of the regulars, maintenance crews, dock workers, and the occasional merchant had already come and gone, leaving only the soft hum of environmental systems as company. The door chimed, and Sarah looked up to see something she'd never encountered in all her years on the station. Illumini, one of the crystalline beings from the Carina Nebula, stood in the entrance, its translucent form refracting the diner's lights in scattered rainbow patterns across the floor. Sarah had only seen them in broadcasts, their species having just joined the Galactic Alliance 2 standard months ago. The Lumini's usual pristine geometric form seemed somehow distorted, its edges dulled and internal light dimmed to barely a flicker. It moved with an unusual hesitation, crystal lattices grinding together in what Sarah could only interpret as distress. "Welcome to Murphy's," Sarah said softly, intuiting that something was wrong. "Please, sit wherever you'd like." The crystalline being drifted to a corner booth, settling into the seat with a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Sarah approached carefully, noting how the Lumini's internal light pulsed erratically, nothing like the steady glow she'd seen in news footage of their diplomatic missions. "Can I get you anything?" she asked, keeping her voice gentle. The universal translator attached to her collar would handle the conversion. The Lumini's response came as a series of musical tones that the translator rendered in a whisper. "Your species. You understand loss." Sarah's heart tightened. She'd served enough grieving customers of various species to recognize the signs. "Yes," she said simply. "We understand loss very well." "I have lost my connection partner." The Lumini's tones became discordant, its form trembling slightly. "Our binding lasted 15 of your centuries. Now I cannot feel their resonance. The silence, it creates chaos in my harmonics." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Would you like to try some chamomile tea? It's an earth plant that can help calm. Well, humans at least. We have it synthesized for non-carbon-based life forms." The Lumini's crystals shifted in what might have been agreement. Sarah prepared the specialized synthetic tea, adding trace minerals that their species could process. When she returned, she found the being's internal light had dimmed even further. "Among my kind," the Lumini said, "when one loses their connection partner, they typically choose to shatter, to join their resonance with the void. But I wish to understand how other species endure, the humans in particular. You are so brief, yet you continue despite countless losses." Sarah set the tea down, watching as the Lumini absorbed it directly through its crystalline surface. "We continue because we have to," she said, "because carrying on honors those we've lost, and because we know that while grief changes us, it doesn't have to end us." The Lumini's internal light flickered rapidly. This is why I came to human space. My designation is Resonance of Distant Stars. I was a harmony master of the third crystalline assembly. But here, I am simply one who seeks understanding." Sarah spent the next few hours listening as Resonance of Distant Stars shared memories of their connection partner, each story accompanied by subtle changes in the being's internal light patterns. She served more tea, offered tissues when the Lumini's surface began to shed minute crystal fragments, apparently their species equivalent of tears, and simply provided a presence in the vast empty night. When the time came to close the diner, Resonance of Distant Stars attempted to pay with a small fragment of their own crystal matrix, an action that Sarah later learned was considered sacred among their kind. "No charge," Sarah said firmly, pushing the crystal back across the counter. Just promise me you'll come back tomorrow if you need to talk more." The Lumini's form straightened slightly, some of its geometric perfection returning. "Your kindness. It creates a new harmony I did not expect. I will return, Sarah Chen. Perhaps there are more ways to continue than my species has imagined." As the crystalline being departed, Sarah noticed something extraordinary. Where resonance of distant stars had sat, the booth's surface was dusted with tiny crystal fragments that glowed with a soft, steady light. She carefully collected them, somehow knowing they would be important. She couldn't have known then that this simple act of compassion would eventually reshape relations between humans and Lumini forever, or that sometimes the greatest diplomatic breakthroughs begin not with grand gestures, but with a simple cup of tea and a willing ear. Sarah's next shift at Murphy started like any other, but the slight weight of the crystalline fragments in her pocket reminded her of last night's unusual encounter. She had carefully wrapped them in a soft cloth, their gentle glow occasionally pulsing in patterns that reminded her of heartbeats. The normal rush of maintenance workers had just cleared out when the diner's door chimed again. This time, 3 Lumini entered, their crystalline forms more geometrically perfect than resonance of distant stars had been, internal lights blazing with formal intensity. They were accompanied by a human woman in a crisp diplomatic uniform, adorned with the Galactic Alliance insignia. "Sarah Chen," the diplomat asked, her expression serious but not unfriendly. "I'm Ambassador Julia Martinez. We need to discuss your interaction with resonance of distant stars." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her pocket where the crystal fragments rested. Is everything all right? Did something happen to them?" The tallest of the Lumini stepped forward, its voice emerging through the translator as deep, harmonious tones. "I am Crystalline Architect of Primary Harmonies. What has occurred here is unprecedented in our history. A harmony master choosing to remain after connection severance. It has created ripples throughout our entire crystalline network." The ambassador gestured to an empty booth. "Perhaps we should sit down. This may take some time to explain." As they settled into the booth, Sarah noticed how the 3 Lumini arranged themselves in what seemed to be a precise geometric pattern. The ambassador pulled out a small holopad and placed it on the table. "What you may not know," Martinez began, "is that resonance of distant stars isn't just any harmony master. They were part of the Lumini's governing assembly. Their connection partner's passing was felt across their entire species. The traditional response would have been ritual shattering, joining their resonance with their partners in the void. But instead, they came here," Sarah finished softly, "for tea and conversation." The second Lumini's voice chimed in with bell-like tones. "Your simple act of kindness has created a philosophical crisis among our people. Some see it as a disruption of sacred traditions. Others view it as a potential evolution in our understanding of existence. The fragments you carry," the third Lumini added, its light patterns shifting rapidly. "They are not merely discarded crystal. They are memory echoes, usually only created during our most significant ceremonial events. That they were created spontaneously, in the presence of a human." Sarah carefully removed the wrapped fragments from her pocket, placing them on the table. The 3 Lumini's internal lights pulsed in perfect synchronization as they observed them. "Remarkable," Crystalline Architect whispered through the translator. "They carry the harmonic signature of both grief and hope. Such a combination was thought impossible." Ambassador Martinez leaned forward. "Sarah, the Lumini government has sent these representatives to understand exactly what happened here. Their species is at a crossroads. This could either strengthen or severely damage our diplomatic relations, depending on how we proceed." Over the next few hours, Sarah recounted every detail of her interaction with resonance of distant stars. The Lumini representatives recorded everything, their internal lights fluctuating with each new piece of information. She described the way the grieving harmony master had absorbed the tea, how they had shared stories of their connection partner, and most importantly, how they had found strength in understanding how humans carried their grief. But I didn't do anything special, Sarah insisted. Anyone would have shown kindness to someone in pain. That, crystalline architect replied, is precisely what we need to understand. This concept of universal empathy, of sharing grief across species boundaries. It is foreign to us. We process loss through prescribed harmonics, through ritual and resignation. The idea that pain can be shared, transformed, and carried forward without diminishment, it challenges everything we believe about the nature of consciousness. As they talked, Sarah noticed something extraordinary. The memory echo fragments on the table had begun to pulse in rhythm with the Lumini representative's internal lights, creating a complex pattern of interconnected illumination. The ambassador's eyes widened as she made notes on her holovat. "There's more," the second Lumini announced, its tone urgent. "These echo fragments are responding to her presence. They're establishing a harmonic connection with her biological rhythms. This is impossible." Sarah felt a subtle vibration running through her body, a sensation like standing too close to a subspace engine, but somehow more intimate, more meaningful. The fragment's light grew stronger, and for a moment, she could have sworn she felt an echo of what Resonance of Distant Stars had described, the vast emptiness of losing the connection that had lasted centuries. "It seems," Ambassador Martinez said quietly, "that Resonance of Distant Stars didn't just find understanding here. They found a way to bridge our species in a way no one thought possible." The third Lumini moved closer to Sarah, its crystalline surface reflecting rainbow patterns across her face. "We must ask something unprecedented of you, Sarah Chen. Resonance of Distant Stars has requested to establish a permanent diplomatic presence here to study how humans process and share grief. We believe, that this could be the key to evolving our species beyond the limitation of ritual shattering. But we need your help," Crystalline Architect added. "These memory echoes have imprinted on you. They represent the first successful cross-species harmonic bonding in our history. Will you help us understand how your kind bears loss without shattering? How you transform grief into connection rather than dissolution?" Sarah looked at the glowing fragments, thinking of Resonance of Distant Stars and their courage in choosing to remain, to seek understanding rather than surrender to tradition. She thought of all the nights she spent listening to grieving customers of countless species, sharing in their stories of loss and resilience. "Yes," she said finally, "but on one condition. We do this here, at Murphy's, not in some sterile diplomatic chamber. Real understanding happens over late-night conversations and cups of tea, not formal meetings." The Lumini representative's lights pulsed with what might have been approval, or perhaps amusement. Ambassador Martinez smiled. "I think we can arrange that, though we might need to upgrade the tea synthesizer." As they prepared to leave, Crystalline Architect turned back to Sarah. "You should know. What you've begun here, it's already spreading through our network. Other Lumini are beginning to question the necessity of ritual shattering. They're asking to learn about human ways of processing loss. You may have just prevented countless future deaths." Sarah watched them go, the memory echoes still pulsing softly in their cloth wrapping. She couldn't help but smile at the thought that somewhere out in the vast expanse of space, other members of this ancient crystalline species might choose to live on, to transform their grief into something new and beautiful, all because of a simple act of kindness in a late-night diner. Little did she know, this was just the beginning. The real challenges and opportunities were yet to come. Murphy's Diner had changed in the weeks following Sarah's encounter with Resonance of Distant Stars. The worn chrome surfaces now reflected more than just the soft blue lighting. They caught and multiplied the subtle glow of a dozen Lumini who had made the diner their unofficial gathering place during the station's night cycle. Sarah moved between the booths, serving synthesized tea and listening to crystalline beings share stories of loss and continuation. The memory echoes she kept in her pocket had become something of a beacon, pulsing in harmony with each new visitor's internal light. But tonight, something felt different. The station's artificial gravity had kipped, just slightly, but enough to make the cups rattle. Sarah steadied herself against the counter, noticing how the Lumini's lights flickered in unison at the disturbance. "Did anyone else feel that?" she asked, but before any of the Lumini could respond, the station's emergency lights flashed once, briefly, before returning to normal. Resonance of distant stars, who had become a regular presence at the counter, shifted their crystalline form in what Sarah had learned was concern. The station's harmonic signature is disturbed. There are resonances that should not exist in mechanical systems. The door chimed, and Chief Engineer Maya Rodriguez strode in, her uniform wrinkled from what had clearly been a long shift. She made straight for Sarah, her dark eyes serious. "We need to talk," Maya said quietly, "preferably somewhere private." Sarah led her to the kitchen, gesturing to her assistant to watch the front. Maya pulled out a handheld scanner, its display showing complex waveforms that meant nothing to Sarah. "Something's affecting the station's power grid," Maya explained. "We're seeing energy patterns we can't explain. They started small, but they're growing. And..." She glanced out at the dining area. "They seem to intensify whenever we have more Lumini visitors." Sarah felt the memory echoes pulse warmly in her pocket. Could it be related to their crystalline technology? "That's just it. We've scanned their ships, their communication devices, everything. This is different. It's almost like..." Maya hesitated, like the station itself is resonating with some kind of emotional frequency. Before Sarah could respond, another gravity fluctuation rippled through the station, stronger this time. In the dining area, the Lumini's internal lights pulsed rapidly, and Sarah heard the distinctive sound of crystalline surfaces grinding in distress. She hurried back out, Maya close behind. The Lumini had arranged themselves in a complex geometric pattern, their lights synchronizing in what appeared to be an attempt to stabilize themselves. "The void song grows stronger," one of them said, their translator barely keeping up with the rapid harmonics. "Too many unresolved severances, too many interrupted resonances." Resonance of distant stars moved to the center of the pattern. "We did not understand the consequences. When we chose to remain rather than shatter, our grief didn't dissipate, it transformed. And now it's affecting the station." Maya finished, her scanner beeping urgently. "The emotional energy you're carrying, it's somehow coupling with our power systems. The more of you that gather here, the stronger the resonance becomes," Sarah whispered, finally understanding. She pulled out the memory echoes, which were now pulsing with an intensity she'd never seen before. "These aren't just recordings of grief, are they? They're more like emotional capacitors." Resonance of distant stars' form shifted in confirmation. "In our natural habitat, such energies would be absorbed by our crystalline networks, transformed through ritual into cosmic background resonance. But here, in this metal sphere..." Another surge rocked the station, and this time the lights flickered ominously. Maya's scanner screamed with alerts. "We're looking at cascade failure in multiple systems," she announced grimly. "Whatever this resonance is, it's building to a critical point, if we can't find a way to ground it or dissipate it." Sarah looked around at the gathered Lumini, their lights now pulsing in obvious distress. Each of them had come here seeking understanding, looking for an alternative to their species' traditional response to grief. In trying to help them, had she inadvertently put the entire station at risk? But then she remembered something Resonance of Distant Stars had said during their first meeting, about how humans continued despite countless losses, about how grief changed them without ending them. "What if," she said slowly, "we're thinking about this the wrong way? You said your rituals transform grief into background resonance. But what if instead of trying to dissipate these emotions, we could channel them into something new?" Maya looked skeptical. "What are you suggesting?" "A bridge," Sarah replied, growing more certain. "Not just between species, but between different ways of processing loss. The station's systems are reacting to your grief because it has nowhere else to go. But what if we could create a space where both our approaches could coexist?" The memory echoes in her hand pulsed brighter, and she felt that familiar vibration running through her body. The Lumini's lights began to synchronize with it, creating complex patterns that spread across the diner surfaces. A hybrid ritual, resonance of distant stars said, their voice filled with wonder. Something that neither of our species has attempted before, but it would require trust, Sarah finished, and courage, from all of us. As if in response, another power surge rippled through the station. But this time, Sarah didn't feel fear. Instead, she felt something else, a deep certainty that they were on the verge of discovering something extraordinary. Maya checked her scanner one last time and squared her shoulders. Whatever you're planning, make it fast. We got maybe 12 hours before these resonance patterns overwhelm our containment systems. Sarah looked at the gathered Lumini, then at the memory echoes glowing in her palm. Then we've got 12 hours to create a new way of handling grief, one that honors both our traditions. Are you with me? The Lumini's lights pulsed in unified agreement, and Sarah felt the memory echoes warm in response. She just hoped they could figure out the details before the station's systems reached their breaking point. Because one thing was becoming clear: the fate of Stellar Waypoint Station, and possibly the future of human-Lumini relations, now depended on their ability to transform grief into something entirely new. Time was running out at Stellar Waypoint Station. The artificial gravity continued to fluctuate as Sarah, Maya, and the assembled Lumini worked to create something unprecedented, a ceremony that could bridge the gap between human and crystalline approaches to grief. The power grid's operating at 130% capacity, Maya reported, her eyes fixed on her scanner. The containment fields are barely holding. Around them, the station's lights pulsed in irregular patterns, matching the increasingly chaotic resonance of the gathered Lumini. Sarah sat at the center of Murphy's diner. The memory echoes spread out before her on the counter. Each crystal fragment pulsed with accumulated grief, not just from resonance of distant stars anymore, but from every Lumini who had visited the diner seeking alternatives to ritual shattering. In our traditions, resonance of distant stars explained, their crystalline form shimming with barely contained energy, grief is transformed through precise harmonics. Each frequency must match exactly, or the ritual fails. But humans don't work that way, Sarah said, watching the crystal fragments pulse. Our grief is messy, imperfect. We share it through stories, through presence, through— She paused, an idea forming. Through connection. The station shuddered again, and Maya's scanner blared another warning. Whatever you're thinking, think faster. We've got multiple systems approaching critical levels. Sarah stood up, decision made. Everyone, gather round. The Lumini arranged themselves in a circle, their internal lights creating a complex pattern of illumination. Maya, I need you to shut down the diner's environmental controls. No recycled air, no artificial atmosphere regulators. That's not safe, Maya protested. The life support. Trust me, Sarah insisted. And I need you to link your scanner to the station's main computer. We're going to need to monitor what happens next very carefully. As Maya worked, Sarah addressed the assembled Lumini. Your species transforms grief through perfect harmonics. We transform it through sharing and connection. So let's do both. She took the memory echoes and began placing them in a pattern that matched the Lumini's arrangement. Among humans, there's an old tradition. When we grieve, sometimes we light candles. Each flame represents a memory, a connection that continues even after loss. The crystal fragments pulsed brighter as she positioned them, their light reflecting off the chrome surfaces of the diner. Maya's scanner began picking up new readings. The resonance patterns are changing, she reported. They're synchronizing, but not in any way I've seen before. Now, Sarah continued, I want each of you to share one memory. Not in your traditional harmonic language, but in words we can all understand. And as you share, focus your resonance through the memory echoes. Resonance of distant stars went first. My connection partner loved to study newly formed stars. Their light would dance through their crystalline form, creating patterns that existed nowhere else in the universe. As they spoke, their internal light pulsed through the memory echo before them. The crystal fragment absorbed the energy but didn't just store it this time. It transformed it, sending it rippling through the patterns Sarah had created. One by one, the other Lumini shared their stories, tales of connections that had lasted centuries, of shared discoveries and quiet moments between stars. With each story, the resonance grew stronger, but different from before. The chaotic energy that had been threatening the station's systems began to shift, finding new pathways through the crystalline network Sarah had arranged. Maya stared at her scanner in disbelief. The power surges. They're stabilizing. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Sarah felt it too. A deep vibration that wasn't quite sound and wasn't quite light, but something in between. The memory echoes were no longer just storing grief. They were transforming it, creating a harmony that incorporated both the precision of Lumini resonance and the organic imperfection of human emotion. The Void Song, one of the Lumini whispered, it changes, becomes music. Sarah stepped into the center of the circle. In human tradition, grief doesn't end. It changes us, becomes part of who we are, but we don't carry it alone. She placed her hand on the nearest memory echo, feeling its warmth. Your harmonics are perfect, but maybe they don't need to be. Maybe grief, like the universe itself, is more beautiful for its imperfections. The station's lights steadied as the new resonance pattern spread through its systems. Maya's scanner showed the power grid returning to normal levels, but something else was happening too. The memory echoes began to shift color, their blue light taking on hints of gold and violet. The crystalline matrix, resonance of distant stars, said in wonder. It's not just storing our grief anymore, it's growing. And it was. Tiny crystal formations were spreading from the memory echoes, creating delicate structures that caught and transformed light in ways neither species had seen before. Each new growth carried echoes of both the precise Lumini harmonics and the organic rhythms of human emotion. My connection partner would have loved this, resonance of distant stars murmured. Something new, born from the meeting of unlike things. Maya checked her final readings. Power levels are stabilizing. Whatever you've done, it's working. The resonance isn't gone, but it's contained, transformed. Sarah looked at the growing crystal formation, now spreading in fractal patterns across the diner's counter. Not contained, she corrected. Shared. This isn't just a memorial anymore. It's a bridge. The Lumini's lights pulsed in agreement, their pattern now perfectly synchronized with the new crystal's glow. They had created something unprecedented. A physical manifestation of grief transformed through understanding, a harmony born of imperfection. But even as they celebrated their success, Sarah noticed something else. The growing crystal structure wasn't just beautiful, it was functional. Somehow, they had created exactly what the station needed. A living resonance chamber that could channel and transform the emotional energies of both species. The question was, what would this mean for the future of human-Lumini relations? And more importantly, what other possibilities might open up now that they had proven that the gap between their species could be bridged? 3 months after the crisis at Stellar Waypoint Station, Murphy's Diner had become something its original builders could never have imagined. The growing crystal formation, now known as the Harmony Bridge, had transformed the space into a shimmering cathedral of light and resonance. Sarah moved through her shift as usual, but now she served both traditional customers and a steady stream of visitors from across the galaxy who came to witness what many were calling a miracle of cross-species collaboration. The crystal structure that had started at her counter now extended throughout the diner in elegant fractal patterns, each branch pulsing with combined human and Lumini emotional energies. The tea today has an interesting resonance. Resonance of distant stars observed from their usual spot at the counter. The once grieving Harmony Master had become not just a regular customer, but an official cultural liaison between their species. Their crystalline form now shimmered with a new complexity, bands of gold and violet running through their traditional blue matrix. "New blend," Sarah replied, smiling. The station's hydroponics team worked with Lumini crystal shapers to create hybrid plants that respond to both chemical and harmonic stimulation. "They're calling it Bridge Blend." The diner's door chimed, admitting a group of newly arrived Lumini. Unlike the earlier visitors who had come seeking alternatives to ritual shattering, these came with purpose, their crystalline forms already incorporating traces of the new hybrid patterns that had emerged from the Harmony Bridge. "Welcome to Murphy's," Sarah greeted them, noting how their internal lights synchronized automatically with the surrounding crystal structure. "Are you here for the continuation ceremony?" The lead Lumini's translator conveyed their response with a musical lilt that would have been impossible months ago. "We are. Our connection partner's time approaches. We choose the new way, the bridge between void and continuation." Sarah nodded, understanding. What had started as a desperate solution to save the station had evolved into something far more profound. The Harmony Bridge didn't just prevent grief resonance from overwhelming mechanical systems. It offered a new path for Lumini facing the loss of their connection partners. Instead of ritual shattering, they could choose to transform their grief through the bridge, allowing their consciousness to evolve rather than end. Maya Rodriguez entered, now wearing the formal uniform of Station Chief Engineer. The crisis had earned her a promotion, especially after she'd helped design the systems that integrated the Harmony Bridge into the station's infrastructure. "Everything's ready," she reported. "The power grid is prepared to handle the resonance transfer." The gathered Lumini arranged themselves in a new pattern, not the rigid geometric formations of their traditional rituals, but something more organic, allowing space for imperfection and growth. Sarah took her position at the center, near the original memory echoes that had started everything. Among humans, she began the ceremony that had become her unofficial role. "We say that love transforms us, that even in loss, we carry forward something of those we've lost, changed but not ended." The Lumini taught us that these aren't just words. They're energy, resonance, patterns that can be shaped and shared. The Harmony Bridge began to pulse in response to her words, its light shifting through complex patterns that represented the merging of two very different approaches to grief and continuation. The Lumini visitor whose connection partner was passing moved to the center of the pattern. "I choose to continue," they said, their voice carrying both the precise harmonics of their species and something new, a tremor of human emotion. "To transform rather than shatter, to carry forward our connection in new forms." The crystal structure responded, its light intensifying. Sarah felt the familiar vibration, not the dangerous resonance that had once threatened the station, but a controlled harmony that spoke of growth and transformation. The Lumini's form began to shift, incorporating new patterns as their grief was not eliminated but transformed, becoming part of a larger whole. Around them, the other Lumini added their own resonance to the ceremony, their lights pulsing in complex patterns that would have been considered chaotic by their old standards, but now created something beautiful in their imperfection. The Harmony Bridge absorbed and transformed their combined energies, sending ripples of light throughout the station. "Look," Maya whispered, checking her ever-present scanner. "The station's power grid. It's not just stable, it's becoming more efficient. The hybrid resonance patterns are actually improving our systems." Sarah watched as the ceremony continued, remembering that first night when a grieving Lumini had entered her diner seeking understanding. They had created more than just a new ritual or a power regulation system. They had proven that the gap between species, no matter how ancient or fundamental, could be bridged through compassion and adaptability. The ceremony concluded as the transformed Lumini emerged, their crystalline form now incorporating the complex patterns of the Harmony Bridge. "I feel different," they said. "The void song remains, but now it has harmony, complexity, hope." Resonance of distant stars moved forward. "You have chosen the new way, neither purely Lumini nor human, but something that honors both. Welcome to continuation." As Sarah looked around at her transformed diner, at the humans and aliens sharing space and understanding, at the crystal structure that represented the best of both species. She realized that this was what humanity did best, not just solving problems, but transforming them into opportunities for growth and connection. The Harmony Bridge glowed steadily, its light a promise of things to come. Somewhere out in the vast expanse of space, other stations were already beginning to grow their own bridges, creating a network of understanding that spanned the gulf between species. And it had all started here, with a simple act of kindness in a late-night diner. "More tea?" she asked the assembled beings, human and Lumini alike. After all, some traditions, like offering comfort to those in need, never needed to change. They just grew, evolved, and created new harmonies in the endless song of existence.